This is an exceedingly rare Khmer Rouge propaganda film. It is to show unity and strength and how the country is developing under Pol Pot. But the truth couldn't be further away from the fiction. For in the 5 years he was in power, over 2 million people were killed. He devastated the country. And these people that you see here, they were often beaten, tortured, and killed where they stood. Even small children were taken away from their parents and beaten to death against nearby trees. And if you were considered to be a subversive, an agent against the Khmer Rouge, you would be carted off to a camp. There, your details would be documented and you would be forced into a room with so many others. And the only fate that awaited you was a long and slow, painful death. Their torture techniques are so horrific, I can only show you these paintings. So the question is, who was Pol Pot? And what was his ideals? Hello and welcome to Forgotten Temples. Where I'm standing right now with the sun going down in the west, if I was here in the 1990s and even the late 1990s at that, I would have been killed. Because where I am is the very heartland of Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge. His house, his hiding place is literally up in those hills where the sun is going down. Now, I've been battling long and hard to locate this place due to there being no internet connection. And as you can see, the day has run out. But tomorrow, I'm back on that road. So join me and let's go and see something and hear a story that will amaze you. This, I promise you, is a road less travelled. It has in fact taken me a day and a half to get here. There is no cell service, therefore my satellite imaging doesn't work. Of course, none of my maps work to guide me. The military stopped me at one border point and just would not let me through. I've been on many a road which has been a blind alley. But finally, I know this to be the road that takes me to Pol Pot's bunker, the last refuge of that tyrant and monster. Now it's interesting because through these trees is Thailand. I could literally walk into Thailand from here. Over here is Cambodia and we're in proper jungle. And it's been an incredible ride. And there's something I've got to tell you about that Pol Pot man. He certainly knew how to hide himself, because finding this has been an incredible task. And I have finally found it. This is in fact his bunker. Over there was his house. And I'll be showing you around. And believe me, it's absolutely fascinating. But it's about time I told you a bit more about the Khmer Rouge. I mean, how did Pol Pot and his murderous gang actually seize control of an entire nation? Well, Pol Pot himself was educated in Paris. He didn't do exceptionally well, but whilst he was there, he hung out with the French communists. And when he returned, he brought back those ideas with him. Now, what amazes me is the ideas of communism he brought back were exceedingly simplistic. I mean, people like Stalin and so on had their ideas of communism, but they did blend them with a bit of I don't know, a bit of business, a bit of commercialism. You've got to keep the money flowing, not Pol Pot. So when he did come back, he joined others that were like-minded, and they were pretty much in the jungle, ignored, until a pivotal point in history. And that was when the Americans started bombing the holy crap out of Cambodia. Because the Vietnamese they were with war with had ran trails for supply lines. And the Americans decided to disrupt those lines. And they bombed and bombed and bombed. They bombed so much, in fact, they dropped more ordnance than they did throughout the entire length of World War II. Now, I personally find this particularly odd, and I've never read this in a history book, but isn't it rather convenient for the Americans that had these enormous warehouses full of bombs that were taking a lot of money and space to store? All of a sudden, they could just throw them out of planes and get rid of them, because they were dropping dumb bombs, of course. With this enormous bombing campaign, of course, brought great misery to the Khmer people. And we're talking about those who live off the land. And when Pol Pot and his Khmer Rouge came along saying everyone should be equal, look at the death and destruction that's raining from the skies, why not join me? And we're going to change the government. And his ranks swelled, and they started to march towards the capital of Phnom Penh. And over time, the further they got, the more people fled. And they went to the capital, and the capital got bigger and bigger and bigger with the volume of people, until that fateful day when Phnom Penh was taken over by the Khmer Rouge. It didn't take them long before they started killing people. I mean, this is what makes Pol Pot so incredible. They march into the capital, and through speakers and loud hailers they announce, the Americans are coming. They are going to bomb the capital. Everyone has to get out. It's for your own good. You have 3 hours. And what they did in that single instant was turned every single person into a peasant, in effect, because they weren't allowed to take anything. You're just leaving for a short while. Now, of course, some people did protest. They were taken round a corner and shot, as well as leading lights, leading scholars. They were taken away and tortured. The killing began the moment they turned up, and it didn't end. This was his bunker, and I'll be taking you down there in a moment. So they emptied the capital of Phnom Penh, and they send everyone into the fields. But the whole thing is completely flawed, because you're sending people into the fields who have absolutely no experience at all with agriculture. And not only that, the higher-ups decree that, let's say, 1 acre of rice field should now produce 5 times its normal yield. These numbers are impossible. So what happens? The managers of those fields, shall we call them, start to lie. But these lies then become transparent in their failing, because the rice never turns up. Then the blame game begins. The only reason the rice hasn't turned up, or the yields haven't been produced, is because people are working against our perfect state. So here's an example. I am ploughing a field with a basic trowel that breaks. Obviously, in their twisted world, I broke the trowel deliberately because I'm against the Khmer Rouge themselves. And if I'm against the Khmer Rouge and I'm a subversive, I'm in it with other people. So they would take me in, let's say a camp like S21. I've done a video on it on this channel. Please view it. It is horrifying. I get carted off to a camp and someone pulls out my nails with pliers. They stub out lit cigarettes in my eyeballs because they know I'm a subversive and I've got to name names. And I do name names through the agony of it all. And I name anyone I can think of, my neighbours, school teachers, I mean anyone. Of course my family are already guilty. And they say, let's get 20 names. So they go off and get those 20 people and the process repeats. They start killing them off as well whilst collecting more names. What they effectively did was create a carousel of death. So how did it all end? Well, because the Khmer Rouge was so out of touch, nobody could ever issue bad news, and this is why all dictators fail. They thought they were much stronger than they actually were. So they started a war with Vietnam. Well, I say war, but because it wasn't. The Vietnamese literally just walked across the border with their tanks and everything else, and the Khmer Rouge literally evaporated. They had no fighting strength at all. I mean, all this stuff that was in their heads was in Never Never Land. So they retreated back, and with the help of various governments, not so much the West, I must say, they were finally penned in. But they still had an influence until 1999. I mean, it's quite incredible. In the late 90s, the Khmer Rouge still had a voice of sorts. And it was only in the 90s that some of these people were brought to trial. It is a fascinating story, and you really should look some more into it. Because when it comes to insane leaders, dictators, you've got to go an awful long way to beat Pol Pot. Here is Pol Pot's compound. Over there is the house. I'll show you in a moment. Here is the bunker. To the right off screen is his garage. Now, why was he here? Well, have a look at this. That is Cambodia. And from up here, I can see absolutely anybody coming. And if you're a paranoid nutter, this is the view you want. And the other thing you can do is run a mast up here and communicate very clearly with your troops. But his main reason for being up here was his back door. We are literally on the very edge of the border with Thailand. Anyone comes this way, I'm legging it. Now, I've been very fortunate because I had trouble getting through to here. It originally wasn't understood by the military as to my reasons, but it was made understandable, shall we say. And an army guy brought me here, and he was actually able to tell me stuff, which is, this is the bunker. Now, this here leads to that exact same spider hole there. The roof is very low, the concrete very thick. But we're going to go down into here because, of course, the opposition army, being the government, would have been bombing this area. This is where the Khmer Rouge are based, and this is where they're causing trouble. Now, let's hope the light, oh, wonderful. That is just great. The iPhone is fantastic at this. This is where he would have cowered. And look at it. It's so much better than Saddam Hussein's job, isn't it? I mean, there's actually a couple of rooms. Now, I haven't been in here. And as you can see, oh, look, here we go. There you go, you see. Now, what would have been here is beds, without a doubt. There would have been a couple of some beds and munitions and stuff like that. So if we come up here, hold on, we completed the loop. Now, this is all genuine. Don't think any of this is, nobody comes here for goodness sake. All this is very real. And even this, which is the hatch that you put on top to stop people falling down it. This is all as it was left by one of the biggest mass murderers the world has ever seen. This was his sanctuary only when he was under attack and being bombed from the skies, because you couldn't get anywhere near him due to him being surrounded by troops. But through this door would have been a house. And we're very fortunate because we can make an awful lot of details here. And with the help of the military man who's guided me in, he has helped me understand it oh so much better. For here would have been the front door. And as we go in, what we see here is one bedroom. And here, a second bedroom. It could also be a radio room, something of that sort, because there's not a lot of space. One would have doubled up with what rooms were used for. I mean, he was hung by his own petard. He couldn't have anything grand because his whole ideas was we just work together and share everything. No one can be different. Now, these are two large water tanks. And what they supplied was this here, the toilet. This is where he sat. Maybe whilst contemplating the death of millions. And on this wall, these holes here, is where a shower once stood. So this is his washroom. And through here would have been a doorway that led directly into the kitchen. Here, I'm told, is where food was prepared. And as you can probably spot, it's quite large. And that's because it wasn't for a single dictator alone. There was also guards here, and they had to be catered for. As we look towards the front of the house again, with our bedrooms to the right, this was the dining area. Now, because the door would have been here leading to the front door, my guess is the dining table would have been here. It only makes sense. So this, with his back to the wall, would seem traditional, would have sat one of the biggest killers this world has ever seen. And I wonder if he ever contemplated, as he was hiding away with his paranoia, maybe it was all too much, killing all those children and all those people who could even speak a language or went to school or had any sort of professional knowledge, be it a doctor, a nurse, an eye specialist. They were all killed off because they were seen as a threat to this guy. Who sat here and dined was an absolute maniac. Now there's something else of interest, and this is why I was so lucky to have this gentleman guide me in, and it is quite a horrendous trail. And I sincerely hope I have no trouble getting out, because there is not a soul around. Now, what this insignificant piece of concrete here is a garage. Now, I would have never have guessed that or worked it out. It's also a guardhouse, he told me, and it makes perfect sense. Here is where a smaller car, like a Jeep, would have gone. And it would have to be a Jeep for roads like this. Here, this larger platform here, is where a bigger vehicle would be, or a couple of vehicles. At the back here, I am told, we have another couple of water tanks. Now, these were puzzling me, but the gentleman explained this is the guardhouse. This is where the guards would stay. And here is some proof of that, because this is the outflow for a toilet. Now, the chances are, obviously, there was numerous guards. I believe what he was telling me is there was 5. They would have probably slept outside because, my goodness, it's hot round here. Now, round the back of the guardhouse and garage, we have something which is enormous. I mean, this is a sort of thing a dictator would have, but I have to clamber down here, and very carefully. Now look, do you see this? See this concrete, which is separated from the earth due to soil erosion? Well, I need to go this way so I can show you to make some sense of all this. Right, now then, it goes all the way around here, all the way across there, along the back, and then along here, and it makes a square. This is an enormous pool. It held a huge amount of water, and not only that, it doubled up. It had a dual purpose. I'm reliably told by my military friend that they grew fish in here, or eels, anything they could, because this was a living larder. But my goodness, it is absolutely enormous. And here I stand with Cambodia in the background. The madman's lair, just there. The one story that really personifies this whole thing for me is when the liberating army entered Phnom Penh, and what they saw absolutely shocked them. The capital was 100% empty. The only living things there were a few stray dogs. Now, if that was not bizarre enough, the whole capital had the stench of death because there was rotten corpses. But around their feet, blowing in the wind, was money, because Pol Pot had made it year 0. There was no need for money. There's no need for individualism. You don't need to own anything. You just work the fields. It was the craziest system that has ever been seen on this planet. And being here is just fascinating. I will never forget this day. I very much hope you've enjoyed this brief video. As always, I ask you, please like, subscribe and comment. And if you wish to sprinkle just a few coins to help me down that dusty trail, then patreon.com/temples, and it would be hugely appreciated. So until next time, I wish you absolutely nothing but the very best. Take good care.